There are some words that cut so deep into a child's soul that they echo for decades, shaping every breath, every dream, every moment of doubt. For 8-year-old Marcus Thompson, those words came from the one person who was supposed to love him unconditionally. You were a mistake. I should have gotten rid of you when I had the chance. This is the story of how one rejected child refused to let those cruel words define his destiny. Marcus pressed his small face against the cold kitchen window, watching other children walk to school with their mothers. Their laughter drifted through the glass like music from another world. A world where children were wanted, where mothers smiled and packed lunches with little notes inside. Get away from that window. Sarah Thompson's voice cut through the morning silence like broken glass. You're getting fingerprints all over it, and I don't have time to clean up after you. The 8-year-old boy quickly stepped back, his breath still fogging the window where he'd been watching. His mother stood in the doorway, her housecoat hanging loose, her hair unwashed for days. The apartment smelled of cigarettes and yesterday's disappointment. I'm sorry, Mama. Marcus whispered, the words automatic after years of practice. He'd learned that apologizing first sometimes made the words hurt less. But not today. Sarah's eyes, once probably beautiful but now hardened by bitterness, fixed on her son with a familiar look of disgust. Sorry doesn't change anything, does it? Sorry doesn't give me back the life I had before you came along and ruined everything. Marcus had heard these words before, but they never stopped feeling like physical blows. He was 8 years old, but he carried the weight of an adult's regret on his small shoulders. Your daddy took one look at you and decided he didn't want to stick around. Sarah continued, lighting another cigarette with shaking hands. Smart man. Wish I'd been that smart. The little boy's chin trembled, but he'd learned not to cry in front of her. Tears only made her angrier. Instead, he focused on a small crack in the linoleum floor, tracing its path with his eyes like a roadmap to somewhere else. I was going to be somebody, his mother went on, settling into her usual morning routine of blame and regret. I had dreams. I was going to move to the city, maybe become an actress or a singer. But then you happened, and everything I ever wanted died. Marcus knew this story by heart. He could recite it along with her, word for word. Sometimes he wondered if other children knew their origin stories as well as he knew his. As a mistake, an accident, a dream, killer. The apartment was small and dark, with thin walls that let in every argument from the neighbors. There were water stains on the ceiling that looked like faces when Marcus lay in bed at night, trying to fall asleep while his mother watched television too loud in the next room. Get yourself ready for school, Sarah said, already losing interest in him. And don't expect me to walk you. I'm not your servant. Marcus nodded and hurried to his room. Really just a corner of the living room sectioned off by a thin curtain. His clothes were in a cardboard box because they'd never gotten around to buying a dresser. Everything in their life was temporary, his mother always said. Everything except him. As he pulled on yesterday's shirt, he could hear Mrs. Hayes moving around in the apartment next door. Mrs. Hayes was old and lived alone, but she always smiled when she saw Marcus in the hallway. Sometimes she asked him how he was doing, and her eyes were kind when she asked, not like his mother's eyes. Once, when Marcus had a fever and his mother couldn't be bothered to stay home from her job at the diner, Mrs. Hayes had brought him soup and sat with him for a while. She'd felt his forehead with a cool, gentle hand and told him stories about when she was a little girl. It was the only time Marcus could remember feeling cared for. Hurry up, his mother called. I don't have all day to wait for you. Marcus grabbed his backpack, a hand-me-down from the church donation box, and emerged from behind his curtain. His mother was already putting on her coat, cigarette dangling from her lips. Remember, she said, not looking at him, come straight home after school. Don't go bothering the neighbors or making friends. We don't need people in our business. Yes, and Marcus. She finally looked at him, her eyes cold as winter. Don't forget what I told you. You're the reason I'm stuck in this place, living this life. Don't you ever forget that. The words hit him like they always did, stealing his breath for just a moment. But Marcus had developed a secret defense against his mother's cruelty. Deep inside his heart, in a place she couldn't reach, he held onto a tiny flame of hope. Maybe someday, someone would see something good in him. Maybe someday, he would matter to somebody. As they walked to school in silence, Marcus noticed Mrs. Hayes sweeping her front steps. She looked up and waved, her face brightening when she saw him. Good morning, Marcus, she called out. Have a wonderful day at school, sweetheart. For just a moment, Marcus felt that tiny flame flicker a little brighter. Someone had called him sweetheart. Someone had wished him a wonderful day. It wasn't much, but it was enough to help him keep walking. His mother didn't acknowledge Mrs. Hayes at all, but Marcus turned back and waved shyly. Mrs. Hayes blew him a little kiss, and for the first time that morning, Marcus almost smiled. Maybe, just maybe, not everyone in the world saw him as a mistake. That small hope would prove to be the seed of his salvation. School had always been Marcus's escape, but it was also where his differences showed most clearly. While other children chatted excitedly about weekend plans or birthday parties, Marcus sat quietly at his desk, watching and learning that some children lived in a completely different world than his. Mrs. Patterson, his third-grade teacher, had kind eyes but was always busy with 30 other students. She'd noticed that Marcus never brought lunch money, never had supplies when asked, and never seemed to have anyone to call when he was sick. But in a school full of struggling families, one quiet boy who never caused trouble wasn't her biggest concern. "Marcus," she said after class one Tuesday afternoon, "could you stay for just a moment?" His heart jumped. Had he done something wrong? He mentally reviewed the day, searching for mistakes, for reasons to be in trouble. "You're not in trouble, sweetie," Mrs. Patterson said, seeming to read his thoughts. "I just wanted to check on you. You seem sad lately. Is everything okay at home?" The question hung in the air like a dangerous thing. Marcus had been taught never to talk about home, never to let people into their business. But Mrs. Patterson's voice was so gentle, so concerned. "Yes, ma'am." He lied, the words coming automatically. "Everything's fine." Mrs. Patterson studied his face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Well, if you ever need to talk, I'm here, okay? And Marcus, you're a bright boy, don't forget that." Bright, someone had called him bright. Marcus carried that word home like a treasure, turning it over in his mind. His mother never called him bright. She called him burden, mistake, problem. But Mrs. Patterson thought he was bright. The walk home took him past Mrs. Hayes's apartment, and today she was in her small garden, tending to the flowers she somehow managed to grow in the small patch of dirt beside the building. "Marcus?" she called, looking up with that warm smile that made something tight in his chest loosen. "Come here, child. I want to show you something." Marcus glanced toward his own apartment. His mother wouldn't be home from work for another hour. Maybe it would be okay. "Look at this," Mrs. Hayes said, pointing to a small green shoot pushing up through the dark soil. "This little fellow wasn't here yesterday. Isn't it amazing how things can grow, even in the darkest places?" Marcus knelt beside her, studying the tiny plant. "What kind is it?" "Sunflower," Mrs. Hayes said proudly. "They're my favorite because no matter what happens, they always turn toward the light. Smart little things, don't you think?" "Yes, Mom." Mrs. Hayes was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, Marcus, I've been thinking. I make way too much food for just one old lady. Would you like to come have a snack with me sometimes after school? We could sit on the porch, maybe read together." Marcus's eyes widened. Someone wanted to spend time with him. Someone was offering him food, but then his mother's voice echoed in his head. "Don't go bothering the neighbors." I don't want to bother you," he said quietly. Mrs. Hayes's expression softened. "Oh, honey, you could never bother me. It would be a joy to have your company. Sometimes this old house gets mighty quiet." Before Marcus could respond, he heard his mother's car pulling into the parking lot. His whole body tensed. "I have to go," he said quickly, standing up. "Of course, dear. But think about what I said, okay? My door is always open." Marcus ran toward his apartment, but not before he heard his mother's voice calling his name. Not gently like Mrs. Hayes or Mrs. Patterson, but sharp and impatient. "Where have you been?" Sarah demanded as he approached. "I told you to come straight home. I don't want to hear your excuses. Get inside." That evening, as Marcus sat at the small kitchen table trying to do his homework, his mother drank coffee that smelled more like the bottle she kept hidden in the cabinet. She watched television and complained about her job, her life, her circumstances. Mrs. Rodriguez at work was talking about her son today, she said bitterly. "He's in college now, studying to be a lawyer." She was so proud, going on and on about how smart he is, how he's going to make something of himself. Marcus tried to focus on his math problems, but he could feel the storm coming. "You know what I thought about while she was bragging?" Sarah continued. "I thought about how different my life would be if I'd made better choices, if I hadn't been stuck with a kid who's going to amount to nothing." The numbers on Marcus's homework page blurred together. He blinked hard, trying to clear his vision. "Look at you," his mother said, her voice getting louder. 8 years old and already a disappointment. Can't even do simple homework without looking like you're about to cry." "I'm trying, Mama." "Trying isn't good enough. Do you think the world cares that you're trying? Do you think trying pays the bills or fixes mistakes? Marcus set down his pencil with shaking hands. The homework was too hard, the numbers wouldn't make sense, and his mother's words were making it impossible to think. I'm sorry, he whispered. Sorry doesn't change anything, Sarah said, echoing her morning refrain. Sorry doesn't give me back the dreams you killed. That night, Marcus lay on his small mattress behind the curtain, listening to his mother move around the apartment. Through the thin walls, he could hear Mrs. Hayes's television playing softly, and sometimes her gentle laughter at something funny on her show. He thought about the sunflower shoot, pushing up through the dark soil. Mrs. Hayes had said sunflowers always turn toward the light, no matter what. Maybe he could be like that sunflower. Maybe he could keep looking for light, even when everything around him felt dark. The next day at school, during recess, Marcus found himself standing alone while other children played. He'd never learned how to join in, how to ask if he could play too. At home, he was unwanted. At school, he was invisible. Hey, said a voice beside him. Marcus turned to see Jamie, one of the popular boys in his class. Want to play kickball with us? We need one more person. Marcus's heart jumped. Someone wanted him to play. Really? Yeah, come on. For 20 minutes, Marcus forgot about everything else. He wasn't the best player, but nobody seemed to mind. When he kicked the ball and made it to first base, Jamie cheered for him. When the game ended, another boy named Tyler said, "Good game, Marcus." Walking home that afternoon, Marcus felt lighter than he had in months. Mrs. Patterson thought he was bright. Mrs. Hayes wanted to share snacks with him. The boys at school had included him in their game. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't a complete mistake after all. As he passed Mrs. Hayes's garden, he saw that the sunflower shoot had grown a little taller. It was still small, still fragile, but it was reaching up toward the sun with determination. Marcus smiled for the first time in weeks. He was going to be like that sunflower. No matter what his mother said, no matter how dark things got, he was going to keep turning toward the light. It was Mrs. Hayes who first noticed that Marcus never seemed to eat lunch. She'd see him from her kitchen window, walking home from school with his shoulders hunched forward, his backpack looking too heavy for his small frame. Something about the way he moved, careful, quiet, like he was trying not to take up space in the world, reminded her of a stray cat she'd once fed, always grateful but never quite trusting. Eleanor Hayes had lived in apartment 2B for 15 years, ever since her husband Thomas passed, and she'd needed something smaller, something manageable. She'd raised 3 children of her own, watched them grow up and move away to build their own lives. Now, at 72, she spent her days tending her small garden, reading library books, and trying not to worry too much about the thin walls that let her hear more than she wanted to about her neighbors' lives. The arguments from apartment 2A had been getting worse lately. Not the kind of arguments married couples have. This was something else. This was the sound of someone being broken down piece by piece, and lately, Eleanor had begun to realize that someone was a child. On a Thursday afternoon in October, when the air was crisp and her sunflowers were finally showing their bright yellow faces, Eleanor was watering her plants when she heard it clearly for the first time. "You're worthless, you know that." Sarah Thompson's voice carried through the thin wall. "Absolutely worthless. I can't believe I'm stuck with you for the rest of my life." Eleanor's hand froze on the watering can. She'd heard harsh words before, but this was different. This was venom. "I'm sorry, Mama," came a small voice that Eleanor recognized. "Marcus, sorry doesn't pay the rent. Sorry doesn't fix the fact that you exist." Eleanor set down her watering can with shaking hands. She'd suspected things were bad next door, but hearing it so clearly made her feel sick to her stomach. That little boy with his careful manners and sad eyes. He was being destroyed by his own mother. When Marcus appeared in the hallway later that afternoon, Eleanor made a decision that would change both their lives. "Marcus," she called softly, "could you help an old lady for a minute?" The boy looked up, surprised. His eyes were red-rimmed, but he tried to smile. "Yes, ma'am. What do you need?" "I've made way too much cornbread, and my back is acting up. Would you mind helping me carry some things? I was hoping to share some with a neighbor, but these old bones aren't what they used to be." It was a gentle lie, but Marcus nodded eagerly. He seemed grateful for any distraction from going home. Inside her apartment, Eleanor watched Marcus look around with wide eyes. Her home was everything his wasn't. Warm, clean, filled with photographs and books and the smell of something good cooking. She had crocheted blankets folded neatly on the couch, plants in every window, and a kitchen that felt like the heart of the home. "Sit down, honey," Eleanor said, gesturing to the kitchen table. "Would you like some milk with that cornbread?" "I don't want to be any trouble." Marcus said automatically. Trouble. Eleanor laughed, a warm sound that seemed to surprise him. Child, having someone to share food with is one of life's greatest pleasures. You'd be doing me a favor. As Marcus ate hungrily, she noticed, like he hadn't had a proper meal in a while. Eleanor studied his face. He was a beautiful child, with intelligent eyes and fine features, but there was something broken in his expression, something that no 8-year-old should carry. How's school going? She asked gently. Good, ma'am. My teacher says I'm bright. Eleanor smiled. I bet you are. What's your favorite subject? Reading? Marcus said immediately, then looked embarrassed. Is that weird? Weird. Honey, reading is how we travel to other worlds without ever leaving our chair. What kind of books do you like? For the next hour, Marcus told her about the books he'd checked out from the school library, about the stories that helped him forget everything else. Eleanor listened, really listened, asking questions and sharing her own favorite books. She watched the boy slowly relax, his shoulders dropping, his voice getting stronger. When it was time for him to go home, Eleanor walked him to the door. Marcus, she said carefully, you know you're always welcome here, don't you? If you ever need anything, anything at all, you just knock on my door. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or recognition that someone had just thrown him a lifeline. Thank you, Mrs. Hayes, he whispered. You don't have to thank me, sweetheart. This is what neighbors do for each other. After he left, Eleanor sat in her kitchen and thought about what she'd witnessed. She'd raised 3 children, worked as a school secretary for 25 years before retiring. She knew the signs of a child in trouble, and Marcus Thompson was showing every one of them. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Marcus would appear at her door after school, usually looking like he'd been crying or trying not to cry. Eleanor would find some small task for him to help with. Moving books, organizing her medicine cabinet, helping her write letters to her children. Really, she was giving him a safe place to land. A refuge from whatever was happening next door. Mrs. Hayes, he said one afternoon while helping her sort through old photographs, why do some mothers not love their children? The question hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She set down the picture she'd been holding, her own son's high school graduation, and looked at this precious boy who was asking questions no child should have to ask. Oh, honey, she said softly. It's not about love. Sometimes grown-ups carry so much hurt inside themselves that they can't see past it. Sometimes they're so busy being angry at the world that they forget how to be kind to the people who need them most. My mama says I ruined her life. Marcus said matter-of-factly, like he was reporting the weather. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Marcus, when he did, she saw her own reflection in his dark eyes. You didn't ruin anything. You are not responsible for any adult's choices or feelings. Do you understand me? He nodded, but she could see he didn't really believe it yet. Sometimes, Eleanor continued, when people are hurting, they say things they don't mean. But that doesn't make those words true. You are a gift, Marcus Thompson. You are smart and kind and good, and any mother would be lucky to have you. That night, after Marcus had gone home, Eleanor lay awake listening to the sounds through the wall. More shouting, more cruel words, and underneath it all, the heartbreaking sound of a child trying not to exist. She thought about her own children, how she'd kissed their scraped knees and celebrated their victories, and loved them fiercely through every stage of their lives. She thought about the phone calls she still got from them, checking on her, sharing their lives with her. Every child deserved that. Every child deserved to be wanted, celebrated, protected. Eleanor made a decision that night. She couldn't change Marcus's mother, and she couldn't legally intervene without evidence of physical harm. But she could love that boy. She could show him what it felt like to be valued, to be safe, to be cherished. She could be his guardian angel, even if she had to do it quietly. The next day, she went to the grocery store and bought ingredients for homemade cookies. She picked up an extra carton of milk, some fresh fruit, and a few books she thought Marcus might enjoy. When he knocked on her door that afternoon, tentatively, like he always did, she opened it wide and smiled. Perfect timing, she said. I was just about to start baking, and I could really use an assistant. As they worked together in her warm kitchen, measuring flour and cracking eggs, Eleanor watched Marcus laugh at something silly she said. For just that moment, he looked like what he was, a normal, happy child. She was going to make sure he had more moments like this. As many as she could give him. In her garden, the sunflowers had grown tall and strong, their faces turned toward the sun. Eleanor looked at them through her kitchen window and smiled. Some things, she thought, were just meant to grow toward the light. By November, Marcus had begun to change in ways that surprised everyone, including himself. The daily visits with Mrs. Hayes had become the anchor of his existence. 2 hours after school where he was valued, listened to, and cared for, it was showing in everything he did. Mrs. Patterson noticed it first at school. The quiet boy who used to sit in the back corner, trying to be invisible, had started raising his hand in class. When she asked questions about the books they were reading, Marcus's face would light up with enthusiasm. He had opinions now, ideas, confidence that his thoughts mattered. "Marcus," she said after class one day, "I've been so impressed with your participation lately. Have you been reading more at home?" "Yes, Mom," he said, thinking of the stack of books Mrs. Hayes had gotten him from the library. "Mrs. Hayes, she's my neighbor. She helps me pick out really good ones." Mrs. Patterson smiled. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up. You've got a real gift for understanding stories." The changes weren't just academic. During recess, instead of standing alone by the fence, Marcus had started joining games of kickball and tag. Jamie and Tyler had become something like friends, and Marcus was learning what it felt like to belong somewhere. "Marcus kicks really hard," Tyler told the other kids one day. "We want him on our team." Simple words, but they made Marcus feel 10 feet tall. Someone wanted him on their team. At home, he was unwanted baggage. At school, he was becoming someone kids actually chose to include. But it was in Mrs. Hayes's kitchen that Marcus truly blossomed. She had a way of asking questions that made him think, of listening that made him feel heard. They talked about everything. Books, dreams, the world beyond their small town, what it meant to be a good person. "You know," Mrs. Hayes said one afternoon while they worked on a puzzle together, "you remind me of my son David when he was your age." Marcus looked up, surprised. Mrs. Hayes didn't talk much about her children, though he'd seen their pictures around the apartment. "Really? Really?" He was quiet like you, thoughtful. But he had this way of seeing things that other people missed. "He's a teacher now, up in Chicago, helps kids who are having trouble in school." "Do you miss him?" Marcus asked. Mrs. Hayes smiled. "Every day. But you know what I've learned? Love doesn't disappear just because someone isn't right next to you. It grows, and it spreads, and sometimes it finds new places to land." She reached over and squeezed his hand gently. "I think God knew I needed someone to love right here close by. Someone who needed loving just as much as I needed to give it." Marcus felt something warm bloom in his chest. Someone needed to love him. Mrs. Hayes, this wonderful woman with her gentle hands and kind eyes, actually needed him in her life. That evening, walking home from Mrs. Hayes's apartment with a plate of leftover pot roast she'd insisted he take, Marcus felt lighter than air. He had friends at school. He had Mrs. Hayes who loved having him around. Maybe his mother was wrong about him. Maybe he wasn't a mistake after all. But the moment he opened the door to apartment 2A, reality crashed back down on him. His mother was sitting at the kitchen table with an empty bottle beside her, and a look in her eyes that Marcus had learned to fear. This was worse than the usual bitterness. This was rage. "Where have you been?" Sarah's words were slurred, but her anger was crystal clear. "Next door with Mrs. Hayes." Marcus said honestly, still holding the plate of food. "I told you not to bother the neighbors." Sarah stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "What did I tell you about staying out of other people's business?" She asked me to help her. "Don't lie to me." Sarah's voice rose to a shout. "I see what you're doing. You think she's better than me, don't you? You think that old woman is a better mother than I am." Marcus's heart began to race. He'd never seen his mother this angry before. "No, ma'am. You just what? You just prefer spending time with strangers instead of your own mother. You think you're too good for this place for me." The accusations came fast and hard, each one more painful than the last. But something had changed in Marcus over these past months with Mrs. Hayes. Her voice was in his head now, steady and sure. "You are not responsible for any adult's choices or feelings." "I don't think I'm too good," Marcus said quietly, his voice steadier than he felt. "I just like helping her." The words seemed to enrage Sarah even more. "Helping her? What about helping me? What about being grateful for everything I've sacrificed for you?" "I am grateful." "No, you're not. You're selfish, just like your father. You take and take and take, and you never give anything back." Sarah grabbed the plate of food from Marcus's hands and threw it against the wall. The ceramic shattered, and pot roast scattered across the floor. "There!" she screamed. "That's what I think of your precious Mrs. Hayes and her charity. We don't need her pity." Marcus stared at the mess on the floor, food that would have been his dinner, kindness that had been destroyed in seconds. Something inside him cracked, but it wasn't his spirit. It was his fear. "She doesn't pity me," he said, his voice stronger now. She likes me. Likes you? Sarah laughed, a harsh sound that filled the small apartment. Nobody likes you, Marcus. They feel sorry for you. That old woman feels sorry for the pathetic little boy whose own mother can't stand him. But the words bounced off Marcus now instead of sinking in. Mrs. Hayes's voice was louder in his head than his mother's. You are smart and kind and good, and any mother would be lucky to have you. That's not true, Marcus said. The simple contradiction seemed to shock Sarah into silence for a moment. Her son had never talked back before, never contradicted her, never shown anything but frightened compliance. What did you say to me? I said that's not true. Mrs. Hayes doesn't pity me. She asked me to help her because she likes having me around, and my friends at school like me too. Tyler said I kick really hard and they want me on their team. Each word felt like a victory, like claiming pieces of himself back from the darkness his mother had tried to wrap around him. Sarah's face went white, then red. Friends, team? You think those people care about you? You think anyone could actually care about a mistake like you? But Marcus was done being called a mistake. He thought about Mrs. Hayes's garden, about the sunflowers that grew tall and strong, because they always turned toward the light. He thought about Mrs. Patterson saying he was bright. He thought about Tyler and Jamie including him in their games. I'm not a mistake, he said quietly. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Sarah stared at her son, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time in years. She saw something she'd never seen before: defiance. This child who had accepted every cruel word, every rejection, every moment of her rage, was finally fighting back, and she couldn't stand it. Get out, she said, her voice deadly quiet. What? Get out of my sight. Go to your precious Mrs. Hayes if she wants you so much. See how long her charity lasts. Marcus stood there for a moment, looking at his mother, this woman who had spent 8 years trying to convince him he was worthless. For the first time, he saw her clearly. She wasn't powerful or right or justified in her cruelty. She was just a broken person trying to break someone else. Okay, he said simply. He walked to his corner of the living room, picked up his few belongings, and put them in his backpack. His mother watched him in shocked silence, as if she couldn't believe he was actually leaving. At the door, Marcus turned back one last time. Ms. Hayes says love doesn't disappear just because someone isn't right next to you, he said. She says sometimes it finds new places to land. Then he walked out of apartment 2A and knocked on the door of apartment 2B. When Mrs. Hayes opened the door and saw him standing there with his backpack and tears in his eyes, she didn't ask questions. She just opened her arms and pulled him close. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered. Come in. You're safe now. And for the first time in his 8 years of life, Marcus truly was. The first morning Marcus woke up in Mrs. Hayes's apartment, he lay still for several minutes, confused by the softness beneath him. Instead of his thin mattress on the floor, he was sleeping in a real bed with clean sheets that smelled like lavender. Instead of harsh voices and slamming doors, he heard the gentle sounds of someone humming in the kitchen. For a moment, he wondered if it had all been a dream. But then he remembered the confrontation, his mother's rage, the moment he'd finally said, I'm not a mistake. The memory made his stomach flutter with something between fear and pride. Good morning, sweetheart, Mrs. Hayes called softly from the doorway. I made pancakes. Are you hungry? Pancakes. Marcus couldn't remember the last time someone had made him breakfast. At home, breakfast was usually whatever he could find in the nearly empty cabinets, if there was anything at all. Yes, ma'am, he said, sitting up. Thank you. Mrs. Hayes smiled, but he could see worry in her eyes. Marcus, we need to talk about some grown-up things today. But first, let's get some food in you. As they sat at her kitchen table, a real kitchen table with placemats and napkins and orange juice in a glass pitcher, Mrs. Hayes explained the situation as gently as she could. Honey, what happened last night? Your mama was very angry, and you were very brave to leave. But there are rules about children living with people who aren't their family. I need to call some people today to make sure everything is done properly. Marcus's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Do I have to go back? The fear in his voice made Mrs. Hayes's heart ache. Not if I can help it, sweetheart, but there might be some visits from social workers, some questions, some paperwork. Are you okay with that? Marcus nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what social workers were. All he knew was that Mrs. Hayes was fighting for him, and that was more than anyone had ever done before. The first social worker arrived that afternoon. Ms. Jennifer Santos was a tired-looking woman in her 30s with kind but wary eyes. She'd seen too many cases like this, but something about the elderly woman and the articulate 8-year-old boy touched her heart. Marcus, she said, sitting across from him in Mrs. Hayes's living room. "Can you tell me what happened at home?" For the first time in his life, Marcus told the truth about his mother. Not the whole truth. Some things were too painful to say out loud. But enough. He talked about the constant anger, the cruel words, the way she told him daily that he was a mistake. Mrs. Hayes held his hand while he talked, and whenever his voice got shaky she squeezed gently to remind him he was safe. "And how do you feel living here with Mrs. Hayes?" Miss Santos asked. "Happy," Marcus said simply. "She makes me feel like I matter." Miss Santos looked around the apartment, clean, warm, filled with books and plants and the obvious signs of someone who cared about creating a home. Then she looked at Mrs. Hayes, who was watching Marcus with the fierce protectiveness of a grandmother. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, "you understand that becoming a foster parent requires training, background checks, home inspections." "I understand," Eleanor said firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes, and Marcus," Ms. Santos continued, "we'll need to try to work with your mother. See if she's willing to participate in counseling, maybe parenting classes." "She won't?" Marcus interrupted quietly. "She doesn't want me." The simple statement hung in the air like a truth too painful for adults to acknowledge. But Ms. Santos had been doing this job long enough to recognize when a child was right. Over the next few weeks, the system slowly ground into motion. Sarah Thompson was contacted multiple times, but refused to meet with social services or discuss custody arrangements. She seemed relieved to have Marcus out of her life, though she wouldn't admit it officially. Mrs. Hayes threw herself into the foster care certification process with the determination of a woman half her age. She took classes, opened her financial records, submitted to interviews and background checks. When other potential foster parents complained about the bureaucracy, Eleanor smiled and said it was the most important job interview of her life. Meanwhile, Marcus bloomed in ways that amazed everyone who knew him. At school, his confidence continued to grow. He joined the library club and discovered he had a talent for helping younger children with their reading. Mrs. Patterson recommended him for the school's peer tutoring program. "You have a gift for this, Marcus," she told him one day after watching him patiently help a kindergartner sound out difficult words. "You make other children feel safe to try, safe to make mistakes. That's a rare talent." At home with Mrs. Hayes, Marcus learned what family life could be like. They cooked dinner together every night, talking about their days. She helped him with homework but also made time for fun, board games, walks in the park, trips to the library where she let him check out as many books as he wanted. "Mrs. Hayes," he said one evening while they were reading together on her couch, "why are you so nice to me?" She looked up from her own book, surprised. "What do you mean, honey?" "I mean, you didn't have to take me in. You didn't have to do all this paperwork and classes. Why did you?" Eleanor set down her book and really looked at him. This boy who was still learning that love didn't have to be earned. That kindness wasn't something you had to pay for. "Marcus, do you remember when I showed you the sunflower seedling in my garden?" He nodded. "I told you that sunflowers always turn toward the light no matter what. But I didn't tell you the rest of the story." She smiled. "Sunflowers also help other plants grow. They make the soil better for everything around them. They're not just beautiful. They're helpful." She reached over and smoothed his hair. "That's what you are, sweetheart. You're like that sunflower. You've been through dark times, but you keep turning toward the light, and now you're helping other people grow too. The children you tutor, me with my lonely evenings, everyone whose life you touch." "But I'm just a kid," Marcus protested. "Just a kid." Eleanor laughed. "Honey, you're the bravest person I know. You survived 8 years of being told you were unwanted, and you still have kindness in your heart. You still help others. You still believe in goodness. That's not just anything. That's extraordinary." That night Marcus lay in his bed. His own bed now, in his own room that Mrs. Hayes had helped him decorate with posters of his favorite books, and thought about what she'd said. Extraordinary. No one had ever called him extraordinary before. He thought about the kindergartner he'd helped that day, how the little boy's face had lit up when he finally read a whole sentence by himself. He thought about Mrs. Hayes, how she'd been lonely before he came along, and how she smiled more now. He thought about all the children in the world who might be lying in dark rooms, being told they were mistakes. Maybe Mrs. Hayes was right. Maybe he could help people grow. Maybe his story wasn't about being unwanted. Maybe it was about learning to recognize love when it appeared, and then spreading that love to others who needed it. 6 months later, the foster care arrangement became official. Mrs. Hayes was now legally his guardian, and Marcus had a home where he was truly wanted. The social worker, Miss Santos, visited one last time to check on their progress. "How are things going, Marcus?" she asked. "Good," he said, then paused. "Really good. Mrs. Hayes says I'm going to help other kids someday, kids who don't have safe places to live. Is that what you want to do?" Marcus nodded seriously. "I want to make sure no kid ever has to feel like they're a mistake. I want to help them find their sunflower families." Miss Santos looked puzzled by the sunflower reference, but Mrs. Hayes just smiled. She understood perfectly. After Miss Santos left, Marcus and Mrs. Hayes went to work in her garden. The sunflowers had grown tall and strong, their bright faces turned toward the afternoon sun. At the base of each plant, smaller flowers were beginning to sprout. "Look at that," Mrs. Hayes said, pointing to the new growth. "The sunflowers are helping other flowers grow." Marcus smiled and continued weeding around the plants. He was 9 years old now, and he had a family who loved him. He had friends at school who valued him. He had a future that looked bright with possibility, but most importantly, he had a purpose. He was going to make sure that other children found their way to the light, just like he had. In the distance, they could hear children playing in the park, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. It was the sound of childhood as it should be, joyful, carefree, full of hope. Marcus stood up and brushed the dirt from his hands, ready to go inside and help Mrs. Hayes make dinner. Ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. He was no longer the unwanted child from apartment 2A. He was Marcus Hayes now, chosen, loved, and growing strong in the light. 8 years had passed since that November night when Marcus walked out of apartment 2A and into a life filled with love. Now 17, he stood 6 feet tall with his grandmother Eleanor's gentle eyes and a confidence that radiated from deep within. The scared, broken boy was gone, replaced by a young man who carried himself with purpose and dignity. Marcus Hayes, he'd legally changed his last name when he turned 16, was everything Mrs. Hayes had always believed he could be. He was president of the student council, captain of the debate team, and a volunteer tutor at the community center. His grades were excellent, and he'd already been accepted to 3 universities with full scholarships. More importantly, he'd kept his promise to himself about helping other children. Every Saturday morning for the past 2 years, Marcus had volunteered at Sunrise House, a local shelter for children in crisis. He worked with kids who reminded him of his younger self, scared, angry, convinced they were unwanted. But something about Marcus's gentle manner and genuine understanding helped them open up in ways that surprised the professional counselors. "You have a gift, Marcus," said Dr. Patricia Williams, the shelter's director. "These children trust you in a way that usually takes us months to achieve. Have you given any more thought to studying social work in college?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, watching a group of children play in the shelter's small courtyard. "That's definitely what I want to do. I want to help kids find safe families like I did." Eleanor, now 80 and moving a bit slower but still sharp as ever, couldn't have been prouder. She attended every one of Marcus's school events, cheered at his debates, and helped him with college applications. Their relationship had evolved from guardian and ward to grandmother and grandson, bound not by blood, but by choice and love. "You know," she told him one evening as they worked together in her garden, now their garden, "I used to think I was saving you. But I think you saved me too." The sunflowers still grew tall and bright, and Marcus still found peace in tending them. But this year, they'd planted additional rows and donated the seeds to the community center, so other children could experience the joy of watching something beautiful grow. Life was good. Marcus felt blessed, purposeful, ready to take on the world. He'd largely stopped thinking about Sarah Thompson, the woman who'd given birth to him but never learned to be his mother. That chapter of his life felt closed, finished, dealt with. Then one rainy Thursday afternoon in March, his past came knocking on the door of Sunrise House. Marcus was in the playroom, helping a 6-year-old named Emma with a puzzle, when the shelter's receptionist appeared in the doorway. "Marcus, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your mother." The puzzle piece in Marcus's hand froze halfway to the board. Emma looked up at him with concern. "Marcus, are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart." He managed his voice steadier than he felt. "Keep working on that corner piece. I'll be right back." In the lobby, Sarah Thompson sat hunched in one of the vinyl chairs, looking every one of her 43 years and then some. Her hair was streaked with gray and pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her clothes were clean but worn, and her hands shook slightly as she clutched a coffee cup from the vending machine. She looked up when Marcus entered the room and her eyes widened with shock. The last time she'd seen him, he'd been a small, frightened boy. Now he towered over her, broad-shouldered and confident, wearing a volunteer badge that read, Marcus Hayes. "Hello, Sarah," he said quietly, surprising himself by using her first name instead of Mum or Mother. "Marcus." Her voice was hoarse, uncertain. You look good, you look healthy." They stared at each other across 8 years of silence, two people who shared DNA but little else. Marcus felt a strange detachment, as if he were observing this moment from outside his own body. "What do you want?" he asked, not unkindly, but without warmth. Sarah flinched at his directness. I wanted to see you, to talk to you." "Okay," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from her. "I'm listening." For a moment, Sarah seemed at a loss for words. Then the familiar bitterness crept into her voice. "I heard you live with that old woman now. That you changed your name." "Ms. Hayes isn't old," Marcus said mildly. "She's my grandmother, and yes, I changed my name. Hayes suits me better." "She's not your real grandmother." "No," Marcus agreed. "She's better than that. She chose to love me." The words hit their mark. Sarah's face crumpled, and for a moment she looked like what she was. A broken woman who'd lost everything that mattered through her own choices. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "I know I made mistakes." Marcus waited, saying nothing. "After you left," Sarah continued, "things got worse. I lost the apartment. I've had problems. Drinking problems." Still Marcus remained silent. "I'm trying to get clean now," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "I'm in a program. I have a sponsor. I'm different now, Marcus. I could be different." "Different how?" Marcus asked. "I could be a real mother to you. We could try again. You could come home." "Home," Marcus interrupted gently. "Sarah, home is where Mrs. Hayes and I tend our garden together. Home is where someone asks about my day and means it. Home is where I'm wanted, not endured." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "But I'm your mother, your real mother." Marcus looked at this woman who'd spent the first 8 years of his life trying to convince him he was worthless, and he felt something, unexpected pity. Not the angry, bitter kind, but the gentle sort you might feel for anyone trapped in their own pain. "You're the woman who gave birth to me," he said softly. "But Mrs. Hayes is my real mother. She's the one who taught me that I mattered. She's the one who celebrated my victories and comforted me when I failed. She's the one who loved me when I was hard to love." "I could learn," Sarah said desperately. "I could try." "Sarah," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly, "I'm 17 years old. I'm graduating in 3 months. I have a scholarship to study social work so I can help kids like I used to be. My life is full of people who love and support me. What exactly are you asking me to give up?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah couldn't answer because they both knew. She was asking him to give up everything good in his life to return to a relationship that had nearly destroyed him. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I'm so sorry for everything I said to you, everything I did. You didn't deserve it. You were just a little boy and I was so angry at the world, and you were the only one I could take it out on." Marcus felt his chest tighten. These were the words he'd dreamed of hearing as a child, the apology that might have healed 8-year-old Marcus. But 17-year-old Marcus had already done his healing. "I know you're sorry," he said gently. "And I forgive you." Sarah looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," Marcus continued. "It doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen, or putting myself back in a situation that hurt me. Forgiveness means letting go of the anger so it doesn't poison my future." "So you won't, we can't go backwards, Sarah. I can't be 8 years old again, and you can't undo 8 years of telling me I was unwanted. But I can wish you well. I can hope you find peace and healing. I can forgive you without forgetting who I am now." Sarah began to cry then, the deep, wrenching sobs of someone finally facing the full weight of their choices. Marcus felt his own eyes sting, but not with the desperate tears of a rejected child. These were the tears of a young man who'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone else's destruction. "I destroyed everything," Sarah wept. "I destroyed my own son." "No," Marcus said firmly. "You didn't destroy me, you tried to, but you didn't succeed. Look at me, Sarah. Really look at me." She raised her head, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not destroyed. I'm strong, I'm loved, I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. Your cruelty didn't define me. Mrs. Hayes's love did." They sat in silence for a few minutes while Sarah composed herself. Finally she stood up, gathering her purse with shaking hands. "I should go," she said. I needed to see you. To know you were okay?" "I am okay," Marcus said, standing as well. "Better than okay." At the door Sarah turned back one last time. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you." "I don't have the right to be, but I am." Marcus nodded. "Thank you for saying that. After she left, Marcus stood in the lobby for a long time, processing what had just happened. He didn't feel angry or upset. He felt peaceful. Complete somehow, as if a circle had finally been closed. He returned to the playroom, where Emma was still working on her puzzle. "Did you finish talking to that lady?" she asked without looking up. "Yes, I did. Was she nice?" Marcus thought about how to answer that. "She was sad," he said finally. "Sometimes when people are very sad for a very long time, they forget how to be nice. But I think she's trying to learn again." Emma nodded seriously, as children do when adults tell them important truths. "My mom was sad too," she said. "That's why I'm here." Marcus knelt beside her, studying the puzzle they were building together. A picture of a garden full of sunflowers. "You know what I've learned, Emma," he said gently. "Sometimes the families we're born into aren't the families we're meant to grow up with. Sometimes we have to find the people who will love us the way we deserve to be loved. Like you did. Like I did. And like you will too." That evening, Marcus told Mrs. Hayes about Sarah's visit. She listened without judgment, holding his hand when his voice got shaky. "How do you feel?" she asked when he finished. "Grateful," Marcus said without hesitation. "If she hadn't been so cruel, I might never have found you. And if I hadn't lived through all that pain, I wouldn't understand how to help the kids at the shelter." Eleanor smiled, her eyes bright with tears of pride. "You know what that means, don't you?" "What?" "You've learned the most important lesson of all, how to turn even the darkest experiences into light for others." Outside their window, the evening sun was setting behind the tall sunflowers in their garden. In a few months, Marcus would graduate and head to college. In a few years, he'd be working professionally with children who needed someone to believe in them. But tonight, he was exactly where he belonged. Home with the woman who taught him that love is a choice, that families are built on more than blood, and that even the most broken beginnings can lead to beautiful endings. The scared little boy from apartment 2A was gone forever. In his place sat a young man who knew his worth, understood his purpose, and carried enough love in his heart to heal the world, one child at a time. 15 years had passed since that rainy afternoon when Sarah Thompson walked back out of Marcus's life for the final time. Now 32, Marcus Hayes sat in his office at the Department of Children and Family Services, reviewing a case file that had kept him awake the night before. The morning sun streamed through his window, illuminating the small garden he'd planted on his windowsill. Sunflowers, of course, their bright faces turned toward the light. The walls of his office told the story of a life well lived. His master's degree in social work from the State University, photos from Mrs. Hayes's 90th birthday party the year before, thank you cards from dozens of children he'd helped over the years, and a framed quote that had guided his career. "Be the adult you needed as a child." Marcus had fulfilled every promise he'd made to himself. He'd graduated summa cum laude, earned his master's degree, and spent the last 8 years working with at-risk children and families. He'd helped place over 200 children in safe, loving homes. He'd testified in court, fought bureaucracy, and sometimes worked 18-hour days because he knew what it felt like to be a child with nowhere to turn. But today's case was different. Today's case had brought back memories he thought he'd fully processed years ago. A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. His colleague, Rosa Martinez, who'd been his closest friend since college and was now his partner in both work and life, poked her head in. "The Wilson family is here for the final meeting," she said gently. "Are you ready?" Marcus took a deep breath and nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." The case that had consumed him for the past 6 months involved 8-year-old David Chen, whose drug-addicted mother had abandoned him in a parking lot with nothing but a note saying she couldn't take care of him anymore. The parallels to his own story weren't lost on Marcus. An unwanted child, a mother who'd given up, a system trying to find where a little boy belonged. But unlike Marcus, David had been fortunate. The Wilson family, Mark and Jennifer, along with their 2 teenage daughters, had opened their hearts and their home to fostering children. They'd taken David in as an emergency placement and had fallen in love with his quiet intelligence and gentle spirit. Today's meeting would finalize David's adoption. As the Wilson family gathered in the conference room, Marcus watched David's transformation over the past months. The scared, angry boy who'd barely spoken during their first meeting was now animated and confident, calling Mark Dad and snuggling against Jennifer during the legal proceedings. "David," Marcus said, kneeling to the boy's level as the paperwork was signed, "how do you feel about all this?" "Happy," David said simply, then paused thoughtfully. "Mr. Marcus, why did my first mom not want me?" It was the question Marcus had been asked dozens of times by dozens of children. It was the question he'd once asked himself. But now he had an answer that came from lived experience. Sometimes, David, grown-ups have problems that are too big for them to handle. They get sick in their hearts and minds, and they can't take care of children the way children deserve to be taken care of. It's not because there's anything wrong with you. It's because they have troubles they can't fix. Like my mom was sick with drugs. Exactly like that. And sometimes when that happens, it means a child gets to find an even better family, a family that chooses them on purpose. David nodded seriously, then looked at his new parents. The Wilsons chose me on purpose. They absolutely did, Marcus said smiling. And they're very lucky to have you. After the Wilson family left with their newest member, Marcus sat in his office reflecting on how many times he'd witnessed this scene. A child finding a family choosing love over biology, a circle of healing completing itself. His phone rang, breaking his reverie. It was the assisted living facility where Mrs. Hayes now lived, her body finally requiring more care than Marcus could provide while working full-time. Mr. Hayes, this is Nancy from Sunset Manor. Your grandmother is asking for you. She says it's important. Marcus's heart jumped. At 91, Eleanor was still sharp mentally, but her health had been declining. He dropped everything and drove to the facility, his mind racing with worry. He found her in the facility's garden, sitting in her wheelchair among the flowers. She'd convinced the staff to let her help plant. Despite her frailty, her eyes were as bright and loving as ever. "There's my boy," she said, reaching for his hand as he sat beside her. "Grandma, they said you needed to see me. Are you okay?" Eleanor smiled. "I'm fine, honey. I just wanted to tell you something important while I still have the chance." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "What is it?" "I got a call today from David Chen's new mother, Jennifer Wilson. She wanted to thank me." Marcus looked confused. "Thank you, for what?" She said her son told her that his social worker was the kindest, most understanding person he'd ever met. That you made him feel safe and valued from the very first day. She wanted to thank the woman who raised such a good man. Tears pricked Marcus's eyes. "Grandma." "But that's not what I wanted to tell you," Eleanor continued, squeezing his hand. "What I wanted to tell you is this: do you remember when you were 8 years old? And you asked me why some mothers don't love their children?" Marcus nodded, the memory still vivid after all these years. "I told you then that sometimes people carry so much hurt that they can't see past it. But what I didn't tell you, what I didn't know then, is that sometimes those hurt people create exactly the right conditions for something beautiful to grow." "What do you mean?" Eleanor's eyes sparkled with the wisdom of 9 decades. "If your birth mother had been different, if she'd been kind and loving, you would have stayed with her. You would have had a perfectly ordinary childhood, and you would have become a perfectly ordinary man. But because she couldn't love you the way you deserved, you found me. And because you experienced that pain, you understand how to heal it in others." She paused, watching a butterfly land on the sunflowers they'd planted together. "Marcus, in the 15 years since you became a social worker, how many children have you helped find safe homes?" "I don't know, maybe 250, 300. And how many of those children might have stayed in dangerous situations if they'd had a different social worker? Someone who didn't truly understand what it feels like to be unwanted." The question hit Marcus like a revelation. He'd never thought about his work in those terms, as a direct result of his childhood trauma. "Your mother's cruelty created something she never intended," Eleanor continued. "It created a man who would spend his life making sure no child ever feels the way you felt. Her darkness became your light, and your light has become light for hundreds of other children." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as the full circle of his story became clear. "Don't you see, honey? You weren't unwanted. You were chosen for something bigger than any of us could have imagined. Every cruel word she spoke, every moment she made you feel worthless, every night you went to bed believing you were a mistake. All of it led to this moment, to this life, to all the children you've saved." Eleanor reached up and touched his cheek. "You weren't her mistake, Marcus. You were God's masterpiece, painted with colors she couldn't see." That evening, Marcus drove home to the small house he shared with Rosa, their own 2 children, adopted siblings from the foster system, and the elderly golden retriever they'd rescued from a shelter. As he pulled into the driveway, he could see his family through the kitchen window, Rosa helping their daughter with homework while their son set the table for dinner. This was the life he'd built from the ashes of rejection. This was what love looked like when it was chosen rather than assumed. Later that night, After the children were asleep, Marcus and Rosa sat in their backyard among the sunflowers that grew along their fence. He told her about his conversation with Eleanor, about the revelation that his pain had become his purpose. "She's right, you know," Rosa said, leaning against his shoulder. "I see it every day in how you work with the kids. You don't just understand their trauma intellectually, you understand it in your bones. That's why they trust you so quickly." Marcus nodded, thinking about David Chen and all the other children who'd passed through his office over the years. Each one had been someone's mistake, someone's burden, someone's accident. But in his office, in his care, they became what they'd always been: precious, valuable, worthy of love. "You know what the most beautiful part is?" Rosa continued. "You broke the cycle completely. Not only did you refuse to become like your birth mother, you became the opposite. You became the adult you needed as a child." As they sat in comfortable silence, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. From the scared 8-year-old who believed he was worthless to the man who now spent his days proving to other children that they mattered. It had been a long road, but every step had been necessary. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jennifer Wilson, David's new mother. "David wanted me to tell you good night. He says you're his hero because you helped him find his real family. Thank you for everything." Marcus smiled and showed the message to Rosa. "That boy has no idea," she said softly, "that he just summed up your entire life's work in one sentence." The next morning, Marcus arrived at his office to find a new case file on his desk. Another child in crisis, another family in need of healing, another opportunity to turn darkness into light. As he opened the file and began to read, the sunflowers on his windowsill caught the morning sun, their faces bright and hopeful, always turning toward the light. Marcus Hayes, once the unwanted mistake from apartment 2A, now the light keeper for children who needed to remember their worth, settled into his chair and got to work. There were children out there who needed to know they mattered. And he would spend every day of his life making sure they heard that message, loud and clear. Because sometimes the most beautiful flowers grow from the darkest soil, and sometimes the most unwanted children grow up to become exactly what the world needs most.